Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Hey, Engagers, this is a quick intro because this episode will be, again, a bit special, a bit different, because this time we will be showing the live recording of the panel that I was holding at the Business Learning Games Conference. Here, we will be listening from the experts, some of the experts that were present at the conference, and these experts are Lars Hoffman. Actually, I should start by the ladies, because, that's the way it should be. We had Sara de Freitas, we had Teresa de la Era, we had Lars Hoffman, we also had Michael Sutton, and we had Michael O'Connor. If you want more details about them, all you need to do is go to professorgame.com, type Business Learning Games panel. You will find the show notes to this episode and understand the details of each of these experts that we are talking to today. Here you will hear the questions that I made, the questions that the audience made, and the answers by each and every one of them. So sit back or continue walking or driving, whatever it is that you're doing, and hopefully enjoy from this episode. And by the way, it might be divided in two parts because we spent quite a while in this very interesting discussion.
For now, let's settle into what should be a very engaging conversation.
Hopefully it'll be a lively panel with such fantastic panelists that we have today. So I was going to make a quick introduction. I think you know them very, very, very well. By many of them have spoken today. Lars was talking earlier about the games that he's been developing and showing. We know our chief vampire officer of the conference here, Paul. Of course, we definitely know Sarah, who just spoke. Teresa was the first speaker yesterday, so if you were not fortunate enough to be here first thing during the conference, she was a fantastic speaker and was making what I felt was a breakdown of some games and why they were working, why maybe they were not working, they were not coherent between the learning and the engagement objectives, and that was fantastic. Michael as well opened the day with his talk around how to break the barriers for innovation and the use basically of game-based learning in education, training, and so on. So I think you know them pretty well. I don't want to spend too much time on that. We will be taking questions from the audience. So if you think of any question, I know some questions have been happening already during some of the talks of our fellow panelists. So please feel free to bring them up. I will try to be calling you out as soon as we finish each round of explanations. And so we'll get started. I just have an initial question to sort of kick this off. And I wanted to know, what do the panelists feel is I always like to talk about what we're looking forward, because as well as Sarah was talking about what is the next thing that we're looking for, is what do you feel is the next thing for the next, and maybe Sarah has already part of that answer from her presentation, the next 5-10 years in game-based learning, gamification, simulations, etc. What do you think is coming up in the next years, or what should we be pushing towards in these next years to come? So I'll leave you to the ladies first, definitely. So Sarah, if you want to start, you were just speaking. Maybe Teresa, who was first yesterday. So
okay, I know that there will be different perspectives to answer this question, and because I'm a researcher, and a qualitative researcher, I think that my responsibility is to explain or to think a little bit about what should happen with research in relation to this field. I think that most studies, in order to assess the effectiveness of learning games, are mainly quantitative studies. And these quantitative studies, in general, try to assess, are we maybe changing the perspectives or the attitudes of users in a positive or a negative way? But in these studies, from my perspective, do not give explanations of what exactly in the game is responsible for these effects. So from my perspective, qualitative research that tries to understand better which are the perceptions of players, in which different ways they interpret the content of the games, could help us a lot to design better games that better respond to their needs and their expectations, of course.
Fantastic, fantastic. What would you like to add, Sarah?
5 and 10 years. All the problems of the world will be solved in 10 years' time by games. I wish. I think there'll be... My feeling is that probably closer to 10 than 5, I think there's going to be a lot more game-based learning across the education systems. And I think that will start to move into universities in a much bigger way. I think we'll probably see quite large proportions in schools of gameplay. So I think there's, it's a complicated sort of piece of work to think about, but I think that would be where my sense is that there will be more, and it'll be much more embedded. It'll be much more considered part of our education system as a whole. So that would be my perspective.
Paul, what do you think? Or do you want to jump in?
I'm not an academic. Okay, so research for me is something that somebody does on stuff that we've already done, design. Well, what I do, when I design games, I design them based on needs. And I see two conflicting issues emerging in this generation that is going to show itself up. One is the expectation that I will be entertained. Okay? So students won't go for traditional lecture-based. They want to be entertained. They want immersive games. They want learning experiences where they're getting rewarded for participating. But then the other side of that, then there's going to be a major problem with engagement levels, lack of engagement, unwillingness to engage. Because already I see it in a younger generation. People are just walking on their phones. They're disconnected from what's happening around them, and that's showing up more and more in the workplace. People are emailing each other rather than just going and saying, "Hi, here's that thing you needed."
Shaking hands.
But that lack of engagement or willingness to engage is going to be a big social problem in years to come. And so I think there are two conflicting things happening at the same time. I want to be entertained, but I'm not willing to go and engage with other people. If I can't send a message into an app, I won't actually go and talk to them. And so I think that's going to be a challenge for learning. And I think there's an opportunity in there then for us to use game-based learning to do with both of those. Create engagement and also create reward systems for learning.
Lars?
Yeah, thank you.
Thoughts?
Well, I'll try to answer as an organization using games and not so much from the educational sector. And I see it the question nested in how we learn that is really changing these days. That so game-based learning is going to follow where learning as a whole is going, and learning and education is very much under disruption. So I think that the major pull will come from that trend, and I think that people will be expecting to be able to just pull game-based learning experiences based on their immediate needs, which will require lots of small games becoming available online. And then as a client looking into the future, it very much comes back to that we are going away from sending our staff on training and much more expecting others to help us here now with our immediate needs. So I think that trend will continue. Also, as companies are becoming smaller, there'll be more small and medium companies. And if you find that answer a bit confusing, it's because I am. I think it's an extremely difficult question, right? I think the world is so unpredictable. So this is the same. I think what will really drive learning is what we've seen also in the past, that it's driven by this huge engine of education. No, not it. What is it called? Leisure games, computer games for fun. That is like a huge motor driving innovation. So it'll kind of drip off on what becomes available for educational games or training games. And I think they'll move very fast into augmented reality and virtual reality. And then we have that, what you were mentioning, Paul, that you can have this safe space in the virtual world, which will create a counter movement that we need a place to learn things that are not in the safe, so we need people to be able to be very personal with each other and handle, conflicts and different things. So there will be definitely a room for the physical presence, non-digital game, teaching people to not look into their phone but to handle conflicts and stuff like that. So I think
that's what has been such a resurgence in board games. Board games have grown enormously in the last number of years. If you go to Essensbill in Germany, it's now a multi-billion euro industry. And it's just board games. People sitting around the table talking to them.
It's only paper. Michael, what are your thoughts?
I guess I see a bit less optimistic future. I'm more of a scholarly practitioner, although I've done lots of research, but I've also been involved in the corporate sector and enterprise sector a great deal. And to me, I cannot see game-based learning achieving any significant niche until at least 60% of the current institutes of higher education go out of business. We are at the crux of a revolution where the younger generations will no longer tolerate the type of learning that many of us came up under. And because of that, universities, which we are already seeing, are in significant financial crisis. And they will go out of business. And they will go out of business quickly over the next decade. At least 60% of all the current institutes of higher education, especially the brick and mortar ones, will no longer exist. And because of that, an emergent set of academies, all based on a new language of games, an object-oriented language of games in which we can incorporate very significant meta pieces of stuff related to learning science into games, especially within that virtual reality area. And to me, that will mean an explosion of coaching and mentoring by human beings. Because as Paul described, we have a very significant disconnect. In the medieval period, when we had apprenticeships, you had a master, and the master created games for the apprentices to learn. That was how learning took place. We still have those apprenticeships in many of the vocational careers today. And because of those apprenticeships, we have a significant connection between those with experience and wisdom and those without experience and wisdom. And so with the downfall of significant institutes of higher education, the emergence of new academies, those academies will incorporate significant game-based learning elements, but will grow immensely in the capability to face-to-face build relationships based on individuals mentoring and coaching the new learners.
Very interesting, thought-provoking at least. I think there was a certain consensus in things. There was a little bit of disagreement as well.
Are we allowed to answer to each other? I was the first one, so I had the possibility to...
if you have anything quick in which to talk about, because we were very interested in this, but I'm sure the audience as well has other questions and we have other things. But please,
I just only have a remark because you said something, right? That researchers, we do analyze what you are designing. But the fact is that when you are designing one game, we are analyzing thousands, right? Mm-hmm. And there is something that I encounter a lot, is this feeling that if we design a game, we are going to engage players directly, no matter what, no matter the content. And I think the fact that we are saying now students are really distracted because they are using technologies. Yes, but I remember myself being a student, not having the technologies, but not being focused at all on what the teacher is saying, right? The difference is now is that we can blame teachers technology. And we see them doing something, but it doesn't mean that. So from my perspective, it's about engagement, but if we are not being able to engage the students because they are not interested in learning what we are offering, games are not going to change that. So it's not only about rewarding systems, but about using gaming techniques to engage students in what we are trying to do. So that is mine.
Just not as in a comment to introduce, but just a reminder. I mean, of course, there are great games in education and non-education, and there's terrible games as well. So the fact that you have a game or you don't have a game doesn't mean it's going to be engaging or disengaging. It has to be a good game. There has to be sound research, game design, and so on. So I completely have to agree with that. You want to jump in as well, Sarah?
I mean, I could just let it go past, but I think maybe just to sort of talk to the point that George, that George was talking about, which was
Michael.
Sorry, Michael.
He wasn't going to get away with it, was he?
No, that wasn't it. But I do find it quite difficult to believe that all universities will be gone in 5 years' time. It doesn't resonate that well with me. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I think the role of mentors will change, and I completely agree with that point. I think there will be more opportunities for mentoring, but I think that universities will adapt and they will evolve, and they need to adapt and evolve to the reality of where we are now. And I actually believe that more people will go to university actually in the future, and I think that more people from different ages will go to university. And I don't think it'll be seen as something so different from the mainstream. I think it'll become a much more fluid model of education, but that's probably over the 10-year to 15-year horizon rather than the next 5 years. It's true that there are issues financially with some universities, but I would say on the whole, that isn't, I don't think there's going to be sort of like a loss of 60% of universities in the next 5 years. I think that would be very unlikely, but I do welcome change and adaptation of universities to embrace more students. And I think through apprenticeships in particular, through games, through different approaches, we do need to make university education more available and more widely available to more people.
Beautiful. I love this controversy. So. This is fantastic for this. So I'd like to open up to questions. I know there's a question over here.
I'm just thinking, like, when you were talking, a lot of you were talking about the type of technology that we were going to use. But I'm starting to see a trend in a lot of things nowadays, maybe due because most people are better off than, at least the people I know are better off than the parents that they had, and so we have more space to worry about other types of things that they didn't worry before. And one of the biggest trends for 2020 I was seeing is people are already traveling a lot more, right? Millennials started traveling a lot more than their parents. And one of the big trends is doing experiences more than just visiting places. It's actually one of the largest markets in the next year, and more money is being put in. It's taking these experiences and putting it into people. But I see also games in education being that. You are more than learning, you're experiencing things, even in the virtual world. So like virtual reality, augmented reality, paper and pen, whatever it is, it's more about doing and experiencing things than just learning things and memorizing. And so do you think this is like a trend in a lot of other things that's going to happen? Is it something that we want more and more to do stuff than just to memorize things that we might need later?
Okay, so quick parentheses. I know probably you will all want to start. If you feel you have something to add, fantastic. If somebody's already said it, feel free. I mean, you don't feel you have to speak every single time. So I think always.
I agree, totally agree. The basis of experiences are emotions, and engagement evokes emotions. And what they're looking for is an emotional experience. An immersive experience is an emotional experience. Because you lose a sense of yourself. You're absorbed by where you are. And that is an opportunity for game design then and learning to create those evocative experiences that you remember years later. I remember games that I played as a kid. I remember experiences that I had as a kid because there's always an emotion slapped onto the memory. And I think it's a very powerful tool that we can use.
Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think that is usually what happens is when you have a need and that need is covered, then you need something else, right? And a few years ago we had the need for information because information was not available everywhere. Now information is everywhere and we have like new needs, and this links to these experiences, and I think links to having extra emotions because we don't have to work that much to look for information because it's already there.
I'll take the opposite perspective just to get some fun. If somebody came to me as an HR director and said, hey, I want to provide these evocative experiences, I would just say, no way. I mean, what? So what are you going to use it for? What's it going to give me, right? So as companies, there's so much we could do. It's such a huge space of opportunity and we really need to focus. And therefore, okay, I know learning and change, so I need some experiences, but exactly how are you going to make sure that it ends somewhere place that we can use, and how will it create more execution power or ability to implement stuff. So I definitely think you've got a trend there in the leisure and the life skills section. But in the companies, it's like, our focus is just going really more and more narrow, and less, patience for these very open-ended learning experiences.
But is that not the conflict between the desire for quantitative information, which is what the company needs, and qualitative experience, which is what the person needs?
Yeah, that might be it.
We reframe things in the language that a person needs to hear. We just don't tell them about all that really good qualitative stuff.
Yeah.
But even in the company, so I'm an engineer, and the company I work on is a lot about engineering, marketing, acquisition, and the way we oil the machine, we've been very happy with management because they usually try new things, and like I would say, we're actually in an agile environment. They always trying to see what works or not. And we tried several agile tools, and some of them work really well, and a lot of them are almost kind of playful. Like I remember one was, we were a lot of engineers, and engineers have big egos, and we love to talk. and so some of the meetings were long. These people would just like to listen to themselves talk, and this technology and that technology, and they started trying stuff, and they started doing the fishbowl technique. Like there's three people in the middle of that talk, and for you to talk, you need to be in the middle. You need to do that peer pressure thing. It's like, no, I want to talk, so I'm going to get up, and one will leave. And it was almost like the chair dance thing. So that kind of stuff, it's removing a little bit the stuff that we were doing in the past, that everyone's sitting down and doing this. And we're playing with it. We're doing stand-up meetings because you don't want to be sitting down too much. We're doing the fishbowl, we're doing even like the way we deal with giving time to projects. They experimented with a lot of things, and a lot of them were like everyone on the table with tickets, doing things. And so that's why I'm saying, like, I think we're moving a lot into a hands-on thing. And then personally I'm learning a lot more with that kind of approach. And I'm seeing that approach being happening in a lot of other things in life. That's why I think there might be a connection.
Okay, great. I know there were more questions, so right here, have something.
It struck me that occasionally somebody mentioned state of flow. We also mentioned the lack of attention span that we see in people, young people. And then on the other hand, we know from the leisure games that there is now a medical diagnosis of being addicted to games. So on that scale of, say, losing attention span, and on the other hand, being very capable in terms of creating addicts, how can that ability to create an addiction be transferred in a positive way, maybe through a game-like experience, into turning people into a state of flow-like capability where you could say, okay, once they're in that flow state, they can absorb, they can learn, they can do fantastic things. So do you see a chance of utilizing games to create like that flow state through an addictive mechanism, maybe learned from leisure games, but then applied in a more beneficial way to, say, unlimited learning capacity?
Okay.
It's like a combination of, can one utilize what is known to make it addictive, but for a positive end?
So if I'm understanding correctly, your question is how can we use maybe the ideas of flow to get people into that state of flow and almost unlimited capacity towards learning.
Right, and utilize what the leisure games do with young people. They create addictive.
So learning from games what they do great, as game designers do great.
Instead of whatever.
Instead of leisure and so on.
Games to create addiction, to create a willingness to learn.
Yes.
For different skill sets.
Yes. So okay, Paul seems to want to go first. The only one. So, yeah.
So there's a story that a goldfish doesn't know what water is because it doesn't know what it's like not to be in water. So it doesn't know the difference. So that will happen when we reach a stage where the students don't know the difference between games and not playing games, where it's so embedded into the learning process that it's just all part of the same thing.
But we're not there yet.
We're a long way from that, because once we make a distinction between didactic classroom-based learning and playing games, there's a chasm between the two of those. And until the two of those merge to the point where you can't see the difference.
So is that difference going to...
I think it goes to what Michael was saying.
The next 10 years?
It goes to what Michael was saying, that it might be worrying, the thought that universities might start to disappear. But what's going to happen is the universities are going to transform. Because the business demands are going to be for immersive, engaged, embedded learning practices. And they will become new business models for universities.
I think it's already going.
Yeah.
It's already going that way.
Yeah.
There's already quite a lot more gamification now, even in universities. We're quite slow to take these things up, but I think it's already sort of happening in that space.
There is a university in Denmark, I believe. We spoke about it last year, where the students, they're basically playing Dungeons and Dragons for the entire year. They take on a role, they take on an avatar, and they learn to play at third level through the entire year. And all of the learning experience are based around a fantasy theme model. And they immerse themselves in that world and they become part of that world and they don't know the difference. And they're learning and they're self-learning in that same process.
I do have a follow-up to this because we're talking about flow, which I think is a very interesting topic and it's very inspirational for game-based learning, gamification, and all these things. My question is, do you feel flow is in and of itself an objective in using game-based learning, gamification, and these strategies?
Hey, Engagers. I have to hit the pause button here and leave the rest of this for next week. And I know it's absolutely fantastic to have you here. So if you want to listen to the rest of this panel, please subscribe through the podcasting app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. Before you move on and you go into your next episode, I'm already using Instagram quite a bit. I'm into the stories, I'm connecting to content, I'm showing you previous episodes as well. So I would really like to connect with you there. My username, just like on Twitter, it is Rob Alvarez B. So please connect with me, and again, if you're curious about what's going to happen next and what about flow, all you have to do is go to professorgame.com or to your favorite podcast app, subscribe, and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there!